Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me again on another podcast of Harvesting Wisdom. I'm your host, Mike McMahon. Today, I have Garth Brown and Cairncrest Farms on the show with me. I want to remind everyone of our mission, and our mission really is to tell the stories of individuals and organizations that embrace sustainability, regenerative farming practices, and proper land management. We believe that's the cornerstone to a more sustainable and thriving planet. So welcome today, Garth. Appreciate you coming on to talk with us about your projects.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I think there's probably a lot of overlap in your interests and mine, but I also suspect, just given where you are in the country and the sort of stuff you do, that there might be some interesting differences, given that I'm up here in New York. I deal with animal agriculture in a pretty rural area. So anyway, I think this could be a cool conversation, and I hope that it'll be a bit of a back and forth as well as just me describing what I do.
Oh, yeah. So let's start with that. I grew up in Buffalo, New York.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I went to University of Buffalo and then came out west. So all the things, all the people I knew and all the things I did as a kid, some of it filters through, but it's kind of a culture shock coming out to a different part of the world and definitely a different biome here, right? So, but as a kid, I gardened and took care of lawns, and I'm used to the seasons and everything else. And we do work with animal husbandry in Africa. Oh. So yeah, raising of chickens and raising of rabbits and guinea pigs and cows and everything else. And one of the reasons for that is that I take waste stream products to make our compost, right? And you can make a pretty good green compost if you have a percentage of green and a percentage of brown. I still think it's superior when you can bring in animals into the equation. Honestly, if it was up to me, we'd be taking human, and we take human waste. Not us per se, but human waste is used for growing a lot of different things and bringing soils back, remediating soils. But for me, that nitrogen and that products that come from animal, it's a reality that we have waste, and the idea is that anything in the waste stream should be recycled. Nothing should be wasted, and it's the same thing, on an animal. When if the animal dies of natural causes, or if that animal is used in some kind of a farming operation, that animal, when it's done, should be used in every possible way, whether it's just meat production or eggs or the various different components of that animal. We all are dust to dust. We're all organisms, including humans. And if it was up to me, I'd take all of us when we're done, and I'd compost us too. So I just think that it's part of a life cycle. I don't think it's sacrilegious to do that from my standpoint. But anyway, I'm on the soapbox already. So let's talk about Cairncrest Farms, and tell me a little about your history. So what part of you're in New York State? What part are you in?
If you look at a map of New York State and put your finger in the very center of it, that's right where we are. So we're sort of
Finger Lakes area?
Well, we're east of the Finger Lakes, we're west of Albany, we're sort of southeast of Syracuse, so we're kind of in the central area where Cooperstown Baseball Hall of Fame is kind of the only thing around that people have heard of.
My good friend and probably the second largest rose grower in the world, Tyler Francis, I've had him on the podcast. Was just in Cooperstown last week with his kids. I guess they had the big baseball
Yeah.
tournament, and 100
All
teams
summer
or
they've
whatever.
got all
They
these
had,
kids coming through to play
yeah,
baseball.
that's great. So you're right there, and I've driven
Yep.
right through there many times, coming back and forth from New York to Buffalo. So
Yeah,
I
and
know
I
I know your
didn't
area.
grow up here. I grew up in Berks County, Pennsylvania, so Allentown area,
Okay,
and then I moved down closer to Philadelphia. And then after college, I was living on Long Island on the very eastern tip, where it actually still is a bit agricultural. My wife is a painter, so she was in an artist residence there. So we were there for a couple of years, and that's where I really started thinking about being a farmer as an occupation. I had been working for a coffee roaster, so I knew I wanted to do something in food, didn't want to do an office job, and I like kind of specialty products, making something really distinct and unique that isn't like anything else. So coffee
sure.
roasting, you can do a bit of that. But while I was out there, I was also working very part time for an oyster farmer and became good friends
Okay,
with commercial berry farmers. Meanwhile, my brother was a registered nurse, and he was up in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. And he didn't like being a nurse that much. So he and his wife started talking to me and my wife and saying, hey, why don't we do this farm together? Because we didn't know that much about farming. We'd sort of grown up in a rural area and then had a little bit of experience here and there. But one of the pretty obvious insights is that when you do it together, it gives you a lot more breathing room. If someone
sure.
just wants to take a vacation, wants to leave the farm for a couple of days,
Absolutely.
doing it collaboratively makes a big
Farming
difference.
farming is 24/7, 365 days a year. Somebody's
Yeah,
got to be there for especially
exactly.
doing animals and that kind of thing. Interesting because, let's see, my mother was from Connecticut. My brother still lives in Madison. My sister was in Long Island, around Montauk area,
Hmm.
and she moved to Maine. And so my brothers still live in Western New York, but and my cousins were in Philadelphia and also in Pittsburgh. So I know the area well. I've
Yeah.
traveled it all, and I know how what you're dealing with. So you got for sure 4 seasons, or at least here in Arizona we have what we call one season, which is hot, and then for a day it cools down. Over there, it's we used to say the same joke. In Buffalo, it'd be we had 2 weeks of summer, and
Yeah.
then the rest of it was pretty cold. So, what do you do on your farm? How big is the farm?
The farm is 211 acres,
That's good size.
and the about 140 of that are pasture, and the balance is in woods. And
Okay.
we do diversified livestock. So we do cows, 100% grass-fed beef. We do sheep. We have Katahdin sheep, which are hair sheep. So you're probably familiar with them from your
Hmm.
work in Africa, but they're not the wool sheep. They're not the big fluffy wool sheep. They're look almost goat-like. So those are for meat, and they're really fantastic animals.
Hmm.
And then we raise pigs as well, also out on pasture. And all of the animals we have, we rotate them around. The sheep and cows we usually rotate together. And what I mean by rotation is we've got the whole farm fenced,
Hmm.
and with this permanent fence, but then every day we go out with portable electric fence and bite off just enough grass to give the cows and sheep one day. So they're always every day getting fresh grass.
Yeah.
And that does a lot of really cool things. I don't know if you want me to go into it, like why we
Oh,
believe so
I
much
love
in
it.
rotational
Sure.
grazing.
Sure. That's and those there's a pretty famous guy now. I can't now that I put the name in my head, I can't think of it, but from Africa, who is
Alan Savory.
yeah, Alan Savory. And I
Yeah.
just went to a farm. You'll have to come to Africa when you can get a break
Yeah.
with us. We go every year, but he worked with my friend father back in the day, and they have a 50,000 acre conservatory and then two 25,000 acre plots next door. So huge area. My some of the most beautiful area probably on the planet I've ever been. But they're raising vegetables. They're working in the bush. They're rewilding. But this concept that you have is, I think, a big. You can't ignore animals in the system or humans in the system or the plants or anything else in the system in that rotation. Now, the only question I'd ask is, do you have chickens? How come you're not following the animals with chickens?
Well, we did have laying hens for a while, and that's just a labor and marketing issue because we've got the chicken we sell is from a friend about 40 minutes away, and he does a great job. And really, the infrastructure to do pastured chicken is a whole other kind of, to do it at scale is a whole other process.
Right.
So
But
right
great,
now,
great
we
fertility,
sell pork
right?
to him. What was that?
Great fertility, though.
It
To
is.
have
It's
all those
amazing.
animals going through and graze, and then
Yeah.
to have the chicken to finish off or whatever. But so your grasses. How many? Do you know how many variety of grasses you have, and what do you
I don't know.
primarily?
My aunt actually came and did a full sort of taxonomy of every species she could find in our pasture. It was around 30,
Wow.
but the primary species are we have a lot of orchard grass. That's the dominant grass. Then we'll also have timothy, some
Okay.
fescue, and then some other grasses that
Kentucky blue and rye and a few others.
we've got a little bit of ryegrass. And then we also have white and red clover, of course. We
Oh,
have
okay,
a
great.
bunch of several different vetches. These are all different legumes, which are great because they fix
Sure.
nitrogen.
Yeah.
And then we've got forbs, we've got plantains, we've got goldenrod, although much less goldenrod and milkweed now that we have sheep. When we just
Hmm.
had cows, those were kind of pest plants. They were, the cows didn't like to eat them that much. But one of the really cool things about multi-species grazing is a lot of the plants that the cows don't like, the sheep are thrilled to
Something
eat.
else does. Sure. Plus, you get probably a decent amount of butterflies with milkweed, and with all the
Yes, we
grasses
do.
you have.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. So you have this ecosystem that you're just nurturing, basically, right? You're not,
Mhm.
and you're nurturing it with the animals, and the animals are. So you've got that entire process that is regenerative that's going on. Now, do you grow any vegetables or any? Do you try to grow any of those grasses up into hay so you have a winter feed for the animals?
We've got a big vegetable garden for ourselves. So actually, one entire year, both my brother and I only ate food we grew.
Wow.
So and our wives thought that was pretty crazy, which it was. But so we've got a huge vegetable garden, but that's not a market operation. It's just for us
Hmm.
and friends. We buy in hay from a neighbor because the thinking behind that is that the amount of equipment you need to make hay efficiently. This is sort of the story of agriculture in
Sure,
the
sure.
20th century and 21st. Is that uh, it keeps consolidating and the equipment keeps getting bigger, and the amount of acres you need to cover to justify owning that equipment also gets bigger. So
Yeah, the industrial process is once
yeah,
you're in, right?
exactly. So we don't really want to own that equipment and be in the hay business. So sometimes we've had people do what's called custom cut. So they will come cut hay off of our land for our use,
Hmm.
but we also buy in hay from our neighbors for our winter
Sure,
feed.
sure. So that's part of the cost of your inputs, and you can do trade outs
Mm,
and that kind of thing. And
exactly.
but family farms, that's a good size. 211 acres is a lot for
Mhm.
basically you and your brother. That's two families. That's enough. And
Yeah.
interesting. I read a lot of books from pre industrial revolution, and one of them that I love is called 10 Acres Enough. Now, some of these books were bestsellers back in the 17th and 18th century or 19th century, right? But 10 Acres Enough was a great story of, how America was being built in It talked about New Jersey and how the trains came in, and just how towns evolved into bigger and bigger, more and more populous. And it all began with agriculture as its base. And they were extremely organic. I mean, there was nothing wasted on the farm. And he talked about 1 acre, 2 acres, 5, 10. And when he got up to 10, it was enough to feed an entire family and to produce enough money to live in the world at that time. And with 211 acres, you got a lot that you can do. And I'll bet your farm plot, even though you were living off it, your brother and family and friends, you're probably probably wasn't even 1 acre, was it? But
Oh no, it was. I'm not going to make up a number. It's definitely less than an acre of cultivated land.
Isn't that
But
amazing how much you can grow and you can feed
absolutely,
yourself off of it? Between that
yep,
and the meat that you're raising, you've got you take that part out of the equation, and you've got your food supply, and as
yep,
long as you're able to turn revenue on the rest, you're doing what you want to do and what you love to do, which is really
yeah.
cool. So
From,
go ahead.
I was going to say, from a land management perspective, even though 211 acres is a lot, when you're managing it with animals, like I like to think of it as the animals are the ones who are actually
Doing
doing
the
the
work.
work. Running an electric line takes a little bit of time, but it's not that much. And meanwhile, you've got a herd of 60,000-pound cows and 80 sheep coming in, and they're the ones who are actually harvesting all the grass and trampling it in and doing all the impact on the land. You're just running a line once a day and then taking down a line. So there's a lot of other work, of course, but one cool thing is you're not trying to cover all of the ground with tractors and machinery. You're trying to figure out how to work with the animals so that they're harvesting their own feed and also having a healthy impact on the ecosystem.
Yeah, so you're not compacting the soil with anything,
No.
but now I grew up in that area, so I already know the answer. But here, if you want anything to grow, you got to irrigate it. Back there, you get enough water and snowpack and that sort of thing, right? Do you have you graded it or have a little small pond on site to have accessible water as well, or no?
We actually didn't have to because we've got quite a bit. We've got about 300 feet of elevation from the lowest part of the farm to the highest, and good water sources. So we've been able to put in gravity feed water lines, one on each side. So there's good water at the very high points, and you put a pipe in there, and then have some sort of places where you can attach a hose to it every couple hundred feet.
Hmm,
So one of the big projects was putting in,
that
3,000 feet
system.
of buried line on one side and 2,500 on the other. But now, no matter where our animals are, we're able to have fresh water for them, and there's no pumps involved. No
That's great.
kind of complex system that can break. It's all just gravity fed water.
Just a mile of piping. And do you get
Exactly.
with climate change? I don't think you probably have it, but is there a permafrost level or layer at all? Is it ever never really freezes all the way down a foot or anything like that?
No,
So,
it'll freeze down a couple feet in a cold
well,
winter.
okay.
About 3 feet is the deepest it ever gets.
So with gravity fed, you have some pipe that's probably at surface, and then some that's
Hmm.
deep at the bottom. Um,
Yeah.
what do you and would you in the winter time? Do you even run it and run that system, or do you just let it drain
Sometimes
out so it doesn't crack?
sometimes we will set up a continuously flowing tank with
Hmm,
like an outflow that takes it back into a little stream. So it comes out of a natural water point and we'll put it back into a stream. And the flowing water will keep it open all winter. So we can set up a fixed water point that has to last for the winter months. But otherwise, yeah, we need to not use it when it's frozen.
Now, do you have a built-in cattle dip at all, so you can wash the cattle at all, or do you don't even need to bother with that in that climate.
We don't really need to bother with that. We let them have access. We've got a pest called the emerald ash borer. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's
Hmm.
sort of going across the whole country, destroying all the ash trees. We've got a lot of ash trees in our forest. It's the primary deciduous species we have. So we're for the foreseeable future, our cows have sort of these natural scratching posts. We'll give them a little bite of the forest because all these trees are dying anyway. So they get shade, they get to rub against them. But long term, we're interested in hopefully preserving some of the maples and other things, aspen we have, and making more of a silvopasture arrangement where we have areas of the farm that have tree cover, but also have grass growing underneath them, more of a savanna kind of
Hmm.
aesthetic, which gives the cows some natural scratching posts, but also shade and increases the biodiversity on the farm because a lot of species like that edge habitat where a forest comes in and sort of blends into a pasture or grassland. There's a lot of species that really thrive on that. So we are trying to, we see that a lot of the forest is just going to die because of this pest that has moved in.
Right.
So we're trying to figure out how can we use that to not be just a disaster, but to sort of shift the farm in a more productive and ecologically diverse
Yeah,
direction.
that's another one of the keys to that sustainable farming practice, regenerative practice, is to leave some of the existing
Hmm.
vegetation, the existing ecosystem in place, and your farm pastures can tie right into it, and that allows for that biodiversity. I'm not sure. I guess I'd look to see if the ash tree. I know we have an Arizona ash here, and I can't remember. As a kid in high school, we used to go into the Boston Hills, my brother and I, and we would thin out the trees that the forest department said needed to go for forest management. We'd cut them down, and then in the wintertime, for some reason, we weren't the smartest guys in the world. We'd drive out with all that cold and snow, and we'd chop them into firewood. And it was useful, and it was profitable for us. Although I think we were selling them for a cord of really good wood for like $35 a cord, which would be was good money to us at the time. But it was great species. That a lot of hardwoods,
Yeah.
cherry and birch and maple. When I was a kid, we had a thing called Dutch elm disease that swept through and killed the most majestic trees in the world that I had ever seen. Right, but I don't know. It's interesting how there's trees, there's families of trees. There's not that many families of trees, and then there's different varieties around the world, and it's not always an unhealthy thing when you see something. Sometimes it is. It's just somebody brought in a bug from another country or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But have you toyed with making any biochar at all with any of that ash?
So my brother is kind of obsessed with biochar, and
He should be.
he makes it with a big sort of oil drum with a so big metal tank with a
Uh huh.
top cut off, and he does the I forget what the method is called, but basically start a fire and build it up. So it's as each layer becomes charcoal, you're sort of preventing it from excluding
Oxygenating.
oxygen by building another layer on top, and then fill it all the way up and then douse it.
Yeah.
So he's been doing that for the past couple of years, and that's all been going into our garden, which is pretty cool because it's a very fine silt that is a decent quality soil, but doesn't hold a ton of nutrients.
Right.
So it's pretty cool to put this
So you
compost.
probably you probably have a fair amount of clay in that soil too, no? Like a more of a
Well,
clayey
interestingly,
loam.
we've got a lot of soil that does have a significant clay portion, but where we put our garden is almost pure silt loam. It's
Oh,
got virtually no clay, so it's got I don't know how, I'm sure you could get really nerdy with me. Like it's got a very low cation exchange capacity, so it really is, not horribly acid or anything, but doesn't hold a ton of nutrients, and the structure isn't ideal. So
yeah. So
it's been pretty
biochar
cool
is
to
a great
exactly.
complement for that. Now, what
Yeah.
we do in Africa, because we're limited in resources, and they do it, they being the people who live there, in places like Malawi and Zimbabwe and up in Ethiopia, is they'll take woods out of the forest, and now it's becoming technically illegal in Malawi, but because they're just clearing too much forest. But if you've got a tree like an elm and it's dying anyway, it's like, okay,
Mhm.
let's use it. But what we'll do is dig a pit and then
Yeah.
chop up and then, like you said, you're making like a Viking burial type of scenario. We take a coconut palm and put that on top and then bury the whole thing with dirt. And we just leave one hole or a chimney on one end and a hole on the bottom, and we'll burn it for a solid 10 days. Now, you might be able to pull it, as weird as it is, your winters can be dry. So you might be able to pull that off in the winter or in
Yeah.
your summertime, but you can certainly get all that wood prepared and that kind of thing. And if you have that pit, and then you just kind of clear the dirt off, and if some of it mixes in, not a problem. But now you've
Mhm.
created that char without oxygen, and that's as simple as it gets, right? But then the idea is to crush that into almost into a powder, small, and you can use 5% or so of that in your as an amendment into your soil. Now, the thing you have to do is activate it first, though.
Yeah.
So you use a compost with that. But so you pen up your animals in the wintertime, though, probably, right? To keep them from freezing outside. Do you have them, or do they
So
stay pasture all year?
the pigs are in a hoop, which we do deep bedding, so they get sort of we just add more organic matter, mulch hay or straw, so it just builds up as the winter goes on. The sheep and cows, we this past year we made a big pad of wood chips. They outwinter is the short answer to your question. So we feed them hay and we move that around. So like an area that's very low fertility will make a big checkerboard of hay bales and
Mm-hmm.
slowly feed those out over the course of the winter, and then they're spreading the manure in a place that really needs it. So we don't actually in the pig bedding we don't spread onto our garden because of parasite concerns. There's a lot of parasites that can go from back and forth, and we don't have a controlled enough composting environment to be confident that we're
Sure.
dealing with all those. But for our garden compost, we get spent grain from a local distillery,
Okay.
which is after they have made their
Sure.
mash, sort of like brewing beer, they've got this leftover grain,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll fill up. They've got so much of it, you can just go get big 300-gallon totes and come
Yeah.
back and
You can
ferment that.
feed
So
you
then
can
that,
feed chickens and stuff with that too. It's just not
yeah,
super high in nutrient value at that
it's pretty
point,
low
but
nutrient.
it's a
Yeah.
great carbon source, no question.
Yeah. So then we
So
compost that and then mix that with the biochar.
okay, yeah, and the animals can eat the biochar too. That's the crazy thing. They a small
Mhm.
percentage of that. So uh, that's interesting. Interesting techniques, and you're right. It's a different part of the planet, but same concepts, same techniques.
Yeah.
Have you tried growing mushrooms at all? Because you have a forest environment out there. You could you might want to do that kind of in a barn near the forest or whatever. But certainly whitecaps or some like an easier blend, and you might be able to put your hogs or your pig waste as a
Mhm.
substrate to doing those mushrooms. But have you
Yeah, I
tried
haven't
any of
done
that
any
yet?
mushrooms. I
Yeah,
haven't
yeah.
tried any mushrooms.
Well, you got a farm, so you're always experimenting, and you're always trying to find a crop that you can get your own inputs for, right? And you
Yeah.
already own the land, and then it's just a matter of time. But that's another great thing because, and then if you expand that garden a little bit, again, that silage from the crops that didn't make it, or some of the
Mhm.
roots or whatever, can go to feed those hogs. Will pretty much eat everything, right?
Yes, they
So,
will.
yeah, but they don't have the stomach, the ruminate. They're not a ruminator like the cows are. Now, how about cheese production? Have you played with that? That's a specialty thing too, right?
Believe it or not, that was the original plan for the farm. So my wife and I went to France and apprenticed with cheesemakers. So the original idea was we were going to do, all the way from milking the cows all the way through to a finished cheese. And the biggest reason that didn't, well, there were a few reasons that didn't happen. For one, was just the infrastructure costs were pretty prohibitive, especially because it would be committing to a sort of single, it's a lot of money into a single product. Whereas
Right.
doing the diversified meat, you can sort of, if people
Sure.
want more beef, oh no, actually people want more land. It's a little easier to sort of grow organically rather than committing to a big facility. The other thing was an issue of timing. Right when we were looking at it seriously, there was some noise that there were going to be regulations that would prevent aging cheeses on wood, which is the traditional practice. You have these wooden shelves in your cave and you age the cheeses on those. Now, this
Hmm.
didn't happen, but that really spooked us because that just one regulatory change could mean that our entire business would have to, change direction
Sure. Sure.
because we were interested in making a very traditional sort of Alpine style cheese,
Oh, that's
which
cool.
has to age on wood. So, yes, definitely have been interested in cheese, but are not doing it commercially right now.
I have a friend here in Phoenix that had a family farm for generations. It was a dairy farm, but they make their own cheese curds, and he started getting sheep out there, and
Hmm.
he milks those as well, and has really nice. I guess if you're in Italy, it's called pecorino, and see in Spain they call it manchego, but that's my favorite
Yeah.
cheese, but he's made it work. But he uses, industrial equipment to do it. And you're right, it's an
Hmm.
investment to do it. And I guess if you do it at a small enough scale, then you build from there, right? You start at a more of a
Yeah.
hobby scale and just give it to friends or have it for yourself,
Yeah.
and then go from there. But the fun part for you is that you got 211 acres, and you can try this and try that, and
Yep.
I'm kind of jealous or envious of you to be able. I do it. What we do is more of on a commercial scale, and we're doing it for other people, and we help other people do their thing. But it'd be nice someday to just have my own little place where I don't talk to humans. I just deal with animals and plants, and
Yeah.
and live in that kind of utopia. So you guys, how long have you had the farm itself? Is that a family piece of property? Or did you?
No, it was we ended up here just by looking at wanting to be near family in sort of the Philadelphia area or close enough for a weekend visit. We knew we wanted to direct market, so be close enough to New York, Boston, Philadelphia to do that. And then just cost and quality of farmland, we sort of ended up here and it ended up being a really wonderful place.
Uh,
And but it was we looked at farms in Pennsylvania, we looked at farms in Vermont, and we looked at farms around here, and just all the sort of factors we were considering pushed us to this area of
just
New
to
York.
stay there. Now,
Yeah.
how many head of cattle do you have, and sheep and pigs? What's your how
It
how
really
many do you
varies
have at this
throughout
point?
it varies throughout the year. Generally between 50 and 100 cows,
Hmm.
and then we've got about 40 ewes right now, and each ewe will have in the neighborhood of two lambs. Sort of averages out. Some have one, some have three, most have two.
Right.
So anywhere from, it's strange as it sounds, 1.8 to 2.2 lambs per ewe on
It's
average.
what do they say for the human race to continue? We need 2.1 children.
Exactly.
A
Yeah.
couple needs 2.1. So I guess that's the how the math all works out to keep your
Yep.
population where you need it to be. And the end product then, do you have a butcher nearby or do you sell
Mhm.
the animals after you've fattened them and you just sell the animal off, or do you actually go through a butcher process and then sell the meats directly? Because this thing is like you can go out to there,
Yeah.
or you can stay focused and do what you're good at. How do you guys do it?
So we sell everything by the cut. So we send the animals to a USDA slaughterhouse, which is required if you're going to sell individual cuts direct to consumer.
Right.
It has to go through an inspected USDA plant. And then on our website, we have a store. So it's all a la carte. People can just go through and build an order. And then every week I pack up the orders in insulated boxes and ship them off to New York City and Long Island and New Jersey and Philadelphia and Boston. So we're limited. I only ship in the Northeast,
Right.
but
And you
that,
have you
that's
probably
helpful.
probably have a pretty good demand for the product then after the question is how far do you scale it from there, because your demand is probably complete almost at this point, isn't it?
Well, actually, there is good demand for it, but there's also, as the niche has grown, there's more what I view as unscrupulous people trying to get in on it. Butcher Box is the most prominent, where they talk a good game about supporting small farmers, but really don't.
Uh,
So there's actually quite a lot of even venture capital going in to try to capture the dollars of people who are interested in supporting small agriculture done right, and they can have very sophisticated campaigns
and,
to
and,
convince people that what they're selling is the same as what I sell. So there is quite a lot of demand for it, but it isn't a matter of just people knocking down my door. There's a lot of what I try to do is education, because not just about why I farm the way I do, but also about the larger food system, because there's a lot of misinformation and unscrupulous people, and just frankly oversimplification, including from people sort of in my camp. There's a lot of uh, information out there that doesn't really grapple with all the nuance that is inherent to growing food and then cooking food and eating food. I mean, I'm sure you appreciate that there's just
yeah,
endless things to consider when you're trying to answer the question, what does it mean to be a sustainable farmer? What does healthy food mean? Healthy for the land, healthy for the animals,
sure.
healthy for the people, healthy for the larger community. All these questions are, I think, fascinating, but they're complex. So, like, one thing I really try to do is communicate and educate without dumbing down all of the sort of intricacies that are inherent to the food system and food production.
Okay, so my producer did order some of your meats, so we'll be getting them. I didn't get them in time for today, but we'll barbecue them up and we'll eat them and splice it into this episodes and we'll see what it is. But one of the things we're going to do, we've got different farmers growing, different commodities left and right, whether or not they're like we just had a podcast with someone who's making linen vegetable bags, and great concept. And she seals it, and what a much better way to store your vegetables in your refrigerator because it's
They're like refrigerator bags, but they're made out of linen and
yeah. And what they do is they'll absorb the moisture and then they'll let the moisture back in because a refrigerator is a dehydrator. So
yep.
really cool stuff. But we're actually going to set up a little online store where people can get a hold of our guests and order. If you, I don't know, because that's a whole nother thing. If you're selling your product, you've got to be careful of how, if you're selling it to Arizona in the summertime, you might say, hey, we won't ship to Arizona in the summer because
Yeah.
with dry
Yep.
ice or whatever you have, as a matter of fact, I get wine shipped to me all the time, and the good wineries, from wherever in the world I get it from, they'll say, we're not shipping it until October to you or whatever, but
Yep.
which is okay, But another good way to push products out and that kind of thing. Now, do you guys have your own little retail store on property at all, where people can just drive up to your driveway and buy stuff, or is it or do you sell it within a few shops in your area?
Yeah, we sell it at like our local health food store, and we're so kind of out in the sticks that we don't have
Get
a
visitors like
store.
that.
We do have it. Obviously, people can put in an order and do on farm pickup, and then they just, same as if I was shipping it, except I pack it up. They drive out, and I give them their order. But we don't have a store. It'd be kind of fun to have one, but I just don't think there's enough traffic to
Right.
justify it.
Right. And it's not like a vegetable stand per se, but
Yeah.
I guess if you had a large enough cooler and you say,
Hmm.
hey, come on over and knock on our door, we'll get you
Yep.
something. But yeah, this way you're promoting the local store. Now, because you're not super labor or equipment intensive, do you hire any labor in at certain times of the year to help with anything you're doing at all?
No, just for a custom job if we need it done, but not for any of the sort of day to day, week to week operations. That's
Okay.
all, and that's all pretty surprisingly consistent. The amount of work from one week to the next. It's not like our neighbors I see who are dairy farmers and have to put a pay or plant corn, harvest corn silage, where they've got
Sure,
these
sure.
times of year where they can work from 6 in the morning until 10 at night and still be behind.
Yeah.
Um, so we don't have the downtimes crop farmers have. In the winter we're just as busy as we are in the summer for the most part. But it's a nice steady sort of.
So
Uh,
walk me through your seasonal processes, right? So in the winter, you've got the animals are still alive; they have to be fed, but
Mhm.
I didn't quite get. So some of them are like the pigs are put into a yard. The cows are left out all winter, or
they're,
are they?
they're out. We'll put them in an area where they have a good wind break and shelter from the elements, natural usually, some section of forest,
Hmm.
and then we'll also have them um, eating on an area of the farm that has poor fertility. So we get big, big, 600-pound hay bales and have those, and we'll slowly feed those out in sort of a checkerboard. So where they'll eat in one place today, and then they'll be 30 feet on tomorrow, and then another 30 feet. So over the course of the winter, they'll sort of spread their manure and their impact over a big area that needs it.
And over a period of years, you've just created a fertile area.
Exactly. Yep.
So that's kind of cool. So, which season do you look forward to, and which season do you kind of dread, or do you just enjoy the change?
Well, it depends from year to year. Like I think consistently the fall is the best because it's cool. You get another flush of growth on the cool season pastures. It's not as nearly as dramatic as the spring, but it's really high quality grass.
Hmm.
The animals, it's sort of perfect conditions for all the animals. I just love that season. Apples are coming in. I think the spring is the most frustrating because uh, this year was actually pretty good, but
So
we've had a
much to do, right?
couple. There's a ton to do, and then it doesn't arrive on schedule. So it's sort of we have plus minus a month of when it's actually going to be here. So we can just have interminable cold, rainy, muddy spring, or suddenly, the grass is growing, you got to get the garden in, and you don't really know when that's going to be. So it's exciting, but it's also kind of,
Frustrating. Yeah,
yeah,
you can have your early summer and then it can turn out not so good. And I do remember as a kid, I used to say my birthday is mid-May, right? So I used to say, okay, summer is or spring at least is starting by then. But I do remember years where just heavy rains all year round that
yeah,
put a damper on the whole summer, because that's the one thing that is kind of nice about living back there is the seasons and the ability. You get tired of the winter, you get tired of the spring, the fall, and the summer, and so but you enjoy aspects of each one too. So it's always nice to have that kind of rotation. But so you're kept busy all year round. You must have quads or something, or do you ride horses to get from point A to point B?
no, it's walk. It's not. I mean, it's 2/3 of a mile to the far edge of the farm from the
Okay,
farmhouse. So
so you're able to get
it's
your
it'll be
exercise.
convenient to have. I think having a little UTV would probably make sense at some point, but on the other hand, walking is fine. It's doesn't
Better,
not another motor to take care of, and
right, right. It's just you got to have that mindset that it's a work. You don't need a gym if
mhm.
you're if you're doing that. So, but okay, so now with your meats themselves, what cuts are they? Because the USDA classifies cuts. So some years you get good stuff, some better. Do you notice the quality as because you've been, it takes a
Mhm.
while to do what you're doing.
Yeah.
Mother Nature took millions of years to do it, and you guys have been there for a decade or so. So,
Mhm.
do you see some of your efforts in the output, the either the yield or in the quality?
Yeah, definitely. And it's always a moving target between the changes of the year and the specifics of the animals. But with the sort of farming that I do, particularly for people who are interested in it, I would say there's a lot of focus on the management, but the genetics are just as important. So
Oh yeah,
finding genetics, animals that are actually adapted and suited to farming the way you want to is really important. Like I mentioned, the Katahdin sheep we use, so they're naturally parasite resistant. They
right,
shed their hair, so they don't need to be sheared. They're just really robust, hardy animals, and we manage them so that they don't have parasite problems as well. Grazing them with the cows, not stocking them too heavily.
right.
But I think people like if we had a different species of sheep we were dealing with, or a different breed of sheep, uh, we'd have to manage them much more intensively. We'd have to worm them. We'd have to, be trimming their hooves constantly. So really getting genetics that match
Sure.
your practices is a pretty important point. And the same thing goes with the cows.
Yeah.
So I would say that we have been getting more consistent and just better, just experience what
Sure.
how it should be grazed, how long a cow needs. Oh, that cow looks finished. It's ready for the butcher. That one needs another 2 months. Like all of that stuff is just you can be taught it to an extent, but a lot of it you kind of just have
Just
to
got to feel it. Yeah. That has to
exactly.
do with the commodity price at the time and that kind of thing,
Mhm.
and your feedstock. My friends in Africa with that conservatory, they put in a center pivot, dammed up the river a little bit,
Mhm.
and have I think they have 5 center pivots now, but they are growing a star grass, and but they changed the genetics, and that's how they work with the community because their steer basically hiring that steer out to help with the villagers changing what they're raising as well. So by being able to have a better cow and more meat, there's less pressure on the bush. They don't kill as many animals in the bush as they used to. So, and you're basically butchering year round, or is it just a few seasons out of the year? How do you? Because that's a finance thing too, right? You've got to balance your budget every month.
We try to. So everything we sell is frozen, which gives us a lot more flexibility because there isn't that shelf life from when you butcher. So that allows us to concentrate it in the summer into the fall, which is mostly that's the easiest time to get a really
Fatten them
good.
up. Uh-huh.
Exactly. But then we will also be finishing some on very high quality hay as well. So it's a year-round thing, concentrated in the summer and fall.
Yeah. Well, I bet your family and your friends are more appreciative of you guys now than they ever would, because now they at least get access to some pretty good meat, huh?
Yep, for sure.
That's pretty cool. Well, I'll let you go. I want to stay in touch with you. I keep thinking I got to go back. I got two brothers in Buffalo, and I have my favorite uncle. He's the last of all my aunts and uncles. Is in his 90s, and I do want to try to visit. I just travel too much out of the country, but I do want to swing by someday. I'll call you if I'm anywhere in the neck of the woods.
Yeah,
and
please do.
Drop down, and we'll have a hamburger together on your farm or something. But and I'd love to be involved with anything that you guys get yourselves involved with. If you do any kind of charity work or anything like that, if you run it by me and let me know.
Well, I'm really interested in. I can't believe I'd never heard of you before. There's all this cool stuff you're doing, so I'm really excited to make this connection. And I hope we get to stay in touch.
All right, we'll do. Garth Brown, I appreciate you being here. Cairncrest Farms. How do people get a hold of you, by the way?
Yeah, so if you just Cairncrest is spelled Cairncrest, but if you spell it Karen, however you spell it, Cairncrest Farms, you'll find the website. And I've got a blog there, so I blog usually once a week. Do an article about something to do. It could be a story from the farm, or it could be sort of a reflection on a larger trend in agriculture.
Oh, cool.
You can sign up for my newsletter, which is I promise interesting and educational, not just a marketing ploy. And then every once in a while I'll write for other websites or journals. So, the newsletters and the website are the best places to keep track of what I'm up to.
I'll have Joe reach out to you, and it's always great to cross market with people, and we'll be able to get a link to what you guys are doing. It's a great story, and we need more of it. We need to. I think it's the direction. Ultimately, we'll go back to what you're doing, or someplace in the middle, because right now the extreme on the other end is not working all that well. So, but do appreciate you being on board here, and we will stay in touch. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.